Ethiopia's disintegration, inevitable or avoidable? Chapter 1. An Empire on the Brink. Emperor Menelik II's expansionist campaigns from the late 19th to early 20th century were pivotal in creating Ethiopia as a dependent colonial empire. His conquests, marked by brutal military engagements and strategic alliances, resulted in the forceful annexation of nations like Oromia, Sidama, Walaita, Somali, and many others. These campaigns led to significant loss of lives, cultural disruption and psychological trauma, and are viewed by many historians as acts of colonization. Some even label them as genocide due to the extreme violence and imposition of Amhara culture and Christianity. Since these conquests, Ethiopia has faced numerous challenges and crises that have threatened its stability and existence. Tensions between various national groups, political instability, and devastating humanitarian crises have brought Ethiopia to the brink of collapse multiple times. These conflicts are not isolated incidents but symptoms of long-simmering tensions fueled by competition for resources, political power, and historical grievances. International actors such as European powers, the US, the European Union, the United Nations, and the African Union have significantly influenced Ethiopia's political and economic landscape from colonial times to the present day. These actors have sided with the victors, oftentimes contradicting the values they officially espouse. Humanitarian organizations have played a crucial role in providing aid during conflicts, but they face significant challenges such as security risks, access restrictions, and resource limitations. The current crisis in Ethiopia is worsened by severe humanitarian disasters. Millions face acute food insecurity, with many on the verge of starvation. The conflict has displaced millions more, creating a refugee crisis that spills over into neighboring countries. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated these challenges, stretching an already fragile healthcare system to its breaking point. The scale of human suffering in Ethiopia is immense, demanding a swift and robust response from the international community. Understanding the root causes of these crises is essential to finding a path forward. Ignoring the warning signs, dismissing the plight of the Ethiopian people, or clinging to the illusion of a unified Ethiopia will only lead to further suffering and instability. The time for action is now. Chapter 2: A History of Internation Tensions. The centralization of power by Amhara and Tigray elites in Ethiopia, particularly through control over land, has been a major source of internation tension. Historically, Amhara dominance involved replacing local administrations with a centralized bureaucracy, marginalizing other groups. Later, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, maintained control, further consolidating power. This centralization led to significant grievances, as marginalized groups like the Oromo sought greater autonomy and recognition. The control over land, a critical resource tied to political power, exacerbated these tensions, contributing to Ethiopia's complex and often volatile political landscape, marked by conflicts and political instability. To comprehend the current crisis in Ethiopia, one must look into its complex history, a tapestry woven with threads of both peace and war. Ethiopia is marked by aggression and conquest that have not been addressed and repeatedly flare into conflict. Despite being a mosaic of over 80 distinct nations and nationalities, each with its own language, culture, and history, the Amhara and Tigray have historically dominated all aspects of life, including the economic, social, and political landscape, often at the cost of other groups. This dominance has bred resentment, particularly among the Oromo, the largest nation, who have been marginalized and excluded from power. Modern Ethiopia, as we know it today, was forged through conquest in the late 19th century under Emperor Menelik II. This process often involved the subjugation and displacement of various national groups, sowing the seeds of future conflict. The legacy of these historical injustices continues to cast a long shadow over Ethiopian society, fueling resentment and mistrust among different nations. Despite attempts at promoting national unity, Ethiopia's rulers have often resorted to suppressing dissent and marginalizing certain groups, further exacerbating existing tensions. This approach has created a cycle of violence and repression that has plagued Ethiopia for decades. The current crisis is not a sudden eruption but rather the culmination of long-suppressed grievances and unaddressed historical injustices. Understanding this complex history is crucial to appreciating the gravity of the current situation in Ethiopia. It is a stark reminder that ignoring the root causes of conflict, however deeply buried in the past, can have devastating consequences. Chapter 3. Can an empire forged by force endure? In an effort to address the deep-seated ethnic tensions and historical grievances, the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, introduced nation-based federalism in 1995. This system was designed to grant autonomy to various national groups, allowing them to govern themselves and manage their own affairs. On paper, this approach seemed promising. It aimed to decentralize power and provide a sense of self-governance to Ethiopia's diverse ethnic mosaic. However, the implementation of nation-based federalism by the Tigray People's Liberation Front-led EPRDF was fraught with challenges and missteps. Poorly drawn regional boundaries intentionally designed to divide and conquer led to competition and conflict over resources and political power. Instead of fostering unity and cooperation, these divisions deepened national fractures, contributing to the country's political instability. Many wrongly view this flawed implementation as a sign of nation-based federalism's failure to achieve its intended goals. Economic inequalities further exacerbated the situation. Tigray and Amhara regions reaped more benefits from economic growth, while others, such as the Oromo, felt marginalized and excluded. This unequal distribution of resources and opportunities fueled significant grievances and strong separatist sentiments among marginalized groups. In Ethiopia, religious differences are deeply intertwined with national identities, shaping the country's social and political landscape. The Amhara and Tigray are predominantly Orthodox Christians, while the Oromo and Somali groups are mainly Muslim. Ethiopian rulers have historically exploited these overlapping identities to sow division between nations, nationalities, and people in Ethiopia. This intersection of religion and national identity has played a significant role in conflicts and power struggles as diverse groups seek recognition and influence. The question that haunts Ethiopia today is whether an empire forged through conquest and maintained through the suppression of difference can truly survive as a unified entity. The idea of a unified Ethiopia, while deeply ingrained in the psyche of some, has always been at odds with the lived realities of many. The current centralized system of government, with its roots in imperial rule, has long been seen by many as a tool for maintaining the dominance of certain groups at the expense of others. This perception of inequality and marginalization has fueled secessionist movements in various parts of the Ethiopian empire. The conflicts in Tigray and Oromia, though rooted in specific political triggers, underscore a broader question about the viability of forced unity in a diverse entity like Ethiopia. The international community, often driven by a desire for stability, has traditionally supported the idea of a unified Ethiopia. This support, however, has often come at the cost of overlooking internal tensions, atrocities, and even genocidal acts, and propping up regimes that have prioritized unity over genuine reconciliation and inclusivity. The current crisis in Ethiopia should prompt a re-evaluation of this approach. Clinging to the notion of a unified Ethiopia at all costs, particularly when it comes at the expense of human rights and perpetuates cycles of violence, is unsustainable. The international community must be willing to engage with the possibility that a peaceful and negotiated separation, however difficult, might be the only path to lasting peace and stability in the region. Chapter 4. Holding on to or letting go. Ethiopia can draw valuable lessons from the experiences of Sudan, South Sudan, and Eritrea, particularly in addressing the challenges faced by the Oromo and other national groups. Sudan's unification was marked by the marginalization of the predominantly Christian and animist South by the Muslim-majority North, leading to decades of civil war and South Sudan's eventual independence in 2011. Similarly, Eritrea's annexation by Ethiopia in the 1960s led to a long war for independence, achieved in 1993, due to Eritrea's distinct national and cultural identity clashing with Ethiopia's centralization efforts. The experiences of Sudan and Eritrea highlight the importance of addressing marginalization and ensuring inclusive governance that respects national diversity. Economic equity is crucial to prevent exacerbating national tensions. Post-independence problems in these countries show that independence does not automatically resolve internal conflicts. Effective governance and reconciliation are necessary to maintain peace and stability. However, independence offers countries economic control, resource management, cultural preservation, political autonomy, and the ability to establish their own international relations and defense policies. These benefits foster economic growth, cultural preservation, and overall national well-being. Understanding the perspectives of ordinary Oromo, Sidama, Woleta, Somali, and other peoples in Ethiopia is crucial for inclusive governance, conflict resolution, economic equity, and cultural preservation. Their voices ensure that policies address diverse needs, fostering a sense of belonging and participation. This inclusive approach is essential for sustainable peace and stability, as it helps build a cohesive and respectful society by addressing the unique concerns of all communities. The diaspora plays a crucial role in shaping international perceptions and policies regarding Ethiopia's future. They actively engage in advocacy and lobbying efforts, raising awareness about human rights abuses and national conflicts through media platforms and social networks. Their involvement in the 2015 Oromo protests highlighted their influence in mobilizing international support and bringing attention to the Oromo struggle. Additionally, the diaspora's economic contributions through remittances support development projects in Ethiopia, giving them a significant voice in policy discussions. By promoting Oromo culture and identity globally, they foster a sense of unity and solidarity among Oromos worldwide, influencing international perspectives on Ethiopia's political and social issues. The international community faces a profound dilemma in its approach to the crisis in Ethiopia. The traditional instinct to preserve the territorial integrity of states clashes with the reality of an empire teetering on the brink of disintegration. The question is whether the world should prioritize holding Ethiopia together, even if it means perpetuating injustice and instability, or consider supporting a more radical solution, a carefully managed separation. For decades, the international community has championed the idea of a unified Ethiopia, viewing it as a bulwark of stability in a volatile region. This stance has often translated into tacit support for authoritarian regimes and indifference towards internal repression. The current crisis, with its roots in long-standing grievances and systemic inequality, demonstrates the limitations of this approach. The international community must recognize that its traditional methods of conflict resolution, focused on ceasefires and superficial power-sharing agreements, have failed to address the root causes of Ethiopia's problems. These methods prioritize a superficial unity over genuine reconciliation and justice, setting the stage for future conflicts. A paradigm shift is needed. Instead of clinging to the idea of a unified Ethiopia, the international community should explore the possibility of supporting a peaceful and negotiated separation. This would involve facilitating dialogue between different nations within Ethiopia, mediating territorial disputes, and ensuring the protection of minority rights. While such a process would be fraught with challenges, it offers the best hope for long-term peace and stability in the region. Overall, the international community must recognize that its current approach, while well-intentioned, risks exacerbating the crisis. The time has come to consider a more radical yet potentially more sustainable solution, supporting a carefully managed separation that prioritizes the well-being and self-determination of all nations and peoples in Ethiopia. By learning from the experiences of Sudan, South Sudan, and Eritrea, and by embracing inclusive governance and cultural preservation, Ethiopia can work towards a more peaceful and equitable future. Chapter 5: Lessons from History. The experiences of Somalia and the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, highlight the severe risks of violent disintegration. Somalia's prolonged civil war has led to significant loss of life, displacement, and the collapse of central governance, resulting in a fragmented and unstable political landscape. Similarly, the DRC, despite its vast mineral wealth, suffers from prolonged conflict driven by resource competition, leading to millions of deaths, widespread displacement, and severe human rights abuses. These examples underscore the potential consequences for a violent disintegration in Ethiopia. Violent disintegration in Ethiopia could result in a humanitarian crisis, economic collapse, regional instability, and human rights abuses. To avoid this fate, Ethiopia must seek peaceful and inclusive solutions, with support from the international community. Peace agreements are essential for ensuring that any separation process is orderly and does not lead to renewed conflict. The Comprehensive Peace Agreement, CPA in Sudan, which facilitated South Sudan's independence in 2011, exemplifies this. Effective peace agreements involve inclusive negotiations, clear implementation mechanisms, and international support and monitoring. They address the root causes of conflict, such as economic disparities and political exclusion, ensuring long-term stability. Without such agreements, the risks of violent disintegration are significant, as seen in Somalia and the DRC. For Ethiopia, a peace agreement is crucial to manage any potential separation peacefully. It should include inclusive dialogue, clear terms, international mediation, and addressing grievances. Learning from the CPA and the experiences of Somalia and the DRC can help Ethiopia avoid violent disintegration and achieve a peaceful resolution. Cultural diplomacy and the preservation of shared cultural heritage are crucial in preventing violent disintegration in Ethiopia. Cultural diplomacy fosters mutual understanding and cooperation between different nations through dialogue and cultural exchanges, promoting national unity and reducing national tensions. It also serves as a tool for conflict resolution by building trust among communities. Preserving shared cultural heritage, such as protecting cultural sites and celebrating diverse traditions, strengthens a sense of national identity and inclusion. This helps maintain continuity and respect among different national groups. Additionally, cultural heritage can drive local economies through tourism and cultural industries, providing economic stability and reducing incentives for conflict. Together, these efforts can address underlying grievances, foster a cohesive society, and prevent violent disintegration by promoting dialogue, understanding, and respect for cultural diversity. The international community's dilemma in Ethiopia is not unprecedented. History offers a sobering reminder that states are not immutable entities, and that their disintegration, while often messy and painful, can sometimes be the only path to lasting peace. The peaceful separation of Czechoslovakia in 1993 stands as a testament to the power of dialogue and compromise. Despite historical tensions, the Czech and Slovak leaders chose the path of negotiation, agreeing to a velvet divorce that minimized instability and bloodshed. This success story underscores the importance of political will, clear communication, and a commitment to finding mutually acceptable solutions. In stark contrast, the disintegration of the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s serves as a chilling reminder of the human cost of failed diplomacy and unchecked ethno-nationalism. The brutal wars that engulfed the former Yugoslavia, fueled by ethnic hatred and political opportunism, left a legacy of death, displacement, and trauma that continues to haunt the region today. The contrasting outcomes of the former Czechoslovakia and the former Yugoslavia provide clear lessons. While peaceful separation requires tremendous effort, compromise, and a willingness to prioritize long-term stability over short-term gains, it offers the best path to a brighter future. Conversely, resorting to violence and clinging to power at all costs only deepens divisions, perpetuates suffering, and sows the seeds of future conflicts. The international community, drawing upon these historical lessons, must encourage all parties in Ethiopia to choose the path of dialogue and negotiation. Supporting a peaceful and orderly separation, while challenging, offers the best hope for averting a humanitarian catastrophe and preventing Ethiopia from becoming another tragic example of violent disintegration. Chapter 6: The Dangers of Maintaining the Status Quo. The Ethiopian government's policies have failed to address the systemic inequalities and grievances of the Oromo people, the country's largest nation in the empire. Despite Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's initial promises of reform, political exclusion, economic inequities, and human rights violations persist. The Oromo Liberation Army, OLA, continues to fight for greater self-determination, with peace talks repeatedly failing due to the government's obstructive approach. Economic neglect in the resource-rich Oromo region exacerbates feelings of marginalization. Additionally, the government's counterinsurgency efforts have led to extrajudicial killings and national origin-based massacres, further alienating the Oromo population. The lack of inclusive governance and failure to address the root causes of conflict risk further violence and disintegration. Ethiopia's instability poses significant risks to neighboring countries like Sudan, Somalia, and Kenya. In Sudan, the influx of Ethiopian refugees strains resources and exacerbates humanitarian challenges, while cross-border skirmishes threaten regional security. For Somalia, Ethiopia's internal conflicts weaken its fight against militant groups like Al-Shabaab, potentially increasing militant activities and destabilizing the region further. Additionally, Ethiopia's instability can influence Somalia's political landscape, complicating electoral processes and governance. In Kenya, the disruption of trade routes and economic activities due to Ethiopia's instability can negatively impact its economy. Moreover, the spillover of conflict can lead to increased insecurity in Kenya's border regions, straining its security apparatus and resources. Addressing Ethiopia's internal conflicts through peaceful and inclusive solutions is crucial not only for Ethiopia's stability, but also for the stability of the entire region. Maintaining the status quo in Ethiopia poses significant long-term risks. Continued marginalization of nations like the Oromo can lead to increased radicalization, as individuals turn to extremist ideologies when peaceful avenues are blocked. Youth disillusionment due to high unemployment and limited opportunities can drive young people towards radical groups. The government's inability to maintain law and order may create power vacuums, leading to the emergence of warlords and localized control. Resource competition can further destabilize regions, perpetuating cycles of violence. Prolonged conflict and instability can cause large-scale displacement and food insecurity, exacerbating humanitarian crises. The international community's current approach to Ethiopia, characterized by calls for dialogue and ceasefires without addressing the underlying issues, risks exacerbating the crisis and prolonging the suffering of millions. The status quo, while seemingly the safest option, is in fact a dangerous illusion. Maintaining a unified Ethiopia at all costs, particularly when it relies on repression and the denial of legitimate grievances, is a recipe for further instability. It breeds resentment, fuels secessionist movements, and creates a breeding ground for extremism and violence. The cycle of violence that has plagued Ethiopia for decades is a testament to the failure of superficial solutions that prioritize unity over justice. The humanitarian cost of inaction is immense and growing. Millions are already facing acute food insecurity, with many on the brink of starvation. The conflict has displaced millions more, overwhelming neighboring countries and stretching aid agencies to their limits. The longer the crisis festers, the more severe the humanitarian consequences will become. Moreover, the current instability in Ethiopia poses a significant threat to regional security. The conflict has the potential to spill over into neighboring countries, drawing in regional powers and exacerbating existing tensions. This could lead to a wider conflagration, further destabilizing the Horn of Africa and unleashing a wave of refugees and humanitarian suffering. The international community cannot afford to stand idly by as Ethiopia descends into chaos. The price of inaction is simply too high. A change of course is urgently needed, one that moves beyond superficial calls for dialogue and embraces the possibility of a carefully managed separation. The time for bold and decisive action is now. Addressing Ethiopia's internal conflicts through inclusive governance, economic development, and effective conflict resolution is crucial to prevent these potential consequences and ensure a stable and prosperous future for Ethiopia and its neighbors. Chapter 7: The Role of International Law and Civil Society. International law plays a pivotal role in guiding the separation process, balancing the principles of self-determination and territorial integrity. Self-determination allows peoples to determine their political status and pursue development, as highlighted in the United Nations Charter and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. This principle has driven decolonization and the creation of new states. Conversely, territorial integrity emphasizes the inviolability of established state borders, aiming to maintain international stability and prevent state fragmentation. This principle is also rooted in the United Nations Charter. The challenge arises when a group within a state seeks independence, potentially threatening the state's territorial integrity. International law does not prioritize one principle over the other, leading to case-by-case assessments. Ultimately, international law seeks to balance these principles, often prioritizing stability and peace, with each situation requiring careful consideration of its unique context. Separation can lead to significant economic challenges, particularly in resource distribution, trade relations, and currency stability. Disputes over natural resources like oil, gas, and minerals can arise, causing economic instability and potential conflict. Trade relations may be disrupted as the new state must renegotiate trade agreements, facing tariffs, trade barriers, and changes in trade routes, which can affect economic growth and investment. Currency issues also pose a challenge. A new state must decide whether to establish its own currency or continue using the former state's currency. Creating a new currency involves gaining international acceptance, managing inflation, and ensuring stability. Using the old currency limits control over monetary policy, affecting the state's ability to respond to economic crises. Overall, careful economic planning and international cooperation are essential to address these challenges and ensure a smooth transition. Civil society organizations, CSOs, are vital in facilitating dialogue and promoting peaceful coexistence during the separation process. They provide neutral platforms for conflicting parties to discuss differences and seek common ground, helping to de-escalate tensions and build trust. By fostering cross-cultural understanding through community events, educational programs, and cultural exchanges, CSOs create environments conducive to peace. Additionally, CSOs monitor compliance with peace agreements, report violations, and advocate for marginalized groups, ensuring all voices are heard. They also support reconciliation efforts by addressing historical grievances and promoting healing through truth-telling and restorative justice processes. Overall, CSOs play an essential role in building sustainable peace by fostering dialogue, promoting coexistence, and supporting reconciliation efforts. While the prospect of a negotiated separation in Ethiopia is undoubtedly daunting, it is not an insurmountable challenge. It requires a clear-eyed assessment of the obstacles, a commitment to dialogue and compromise, and unwavering support from the international community. The first step is to acknowledge the legitimate grievances of all parties involved. This process includes addressing historical injustices, promoting equitable power sharing, and ensuring minority rights protection. Ignoring or downplaying these grievances will only perpetuate the cycle of violence and resentment. Secondly, a clear framework for separation must be established, outlining the process for negotiating borders, determining citizenship, and sharing resources. This process must be inclusive, transparent, and guided by the principles of self-determination and international law. Thirdly, a robust international peacekeeping force may be necessary to ensure a safe and orderly separation, deter spoilers, and protect civilians. This force should be neutral, well-equipped, and authorized to use force to prevent violence and maintain peace. The international community has a crucial role to play in supporting this process. This includes providing financial and technical assistance, facilitating dialogue between different nations, and holding all parties accountable for human rights violations. The United Nations, African Union, and other regional actors must work together to ensure a coordinated and effective response. The road to peace in Ethiopia will be long and arduous. However, by acknowledging the need for a fundamental reset, embracing the possibility of separation, and providing unwavering support, the international community can help Ethiopia transition from an empire of perpetual crisis to a nation of nations where peace, stability, and shared prosperity thrive. Chapter 8: A Double-Edged Sword. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's leadership initially showed great promise but ultimately failed to deliver lasting stability. His early achievements, such as the peace agreement with Eritrea, were initially celebrated and even earned him the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019. However, what was initially seen as a historic peace deal later revealed itself to be a strategic alliance that contributed to the devastating conflict in Tigray. Despite introducing political reforms and pursuing economic liberalization, these efforts were overshadowed by the ensuing violence and humanitarian crisis, contributing to Ethiopia's current turmoil. His tenure has been marred by rising tensions and violence along national identity lines, partly due to his centralization efforts perceived as marginalizing certain groups. The conflict in the Tigray region, which began in November 2020, has resulted in severe humanitarian crises and international condemnation. Additionally, Abiy's government has faced accusations of authoritarian practices, including media censorship and the arrest of political opponents. The secretive Kori Naginya, which allegedly operates with impunity at Abiy's behest, has exacerbated divisions and contributed to ongoing instability in Ethiopia. Opposition movements, including armed groups and peaceful activists, significantly influence Ethiopia's crisis. Armed groups escalate conflicts through military resistance, leading to violence and humanitarian crises. Peaceful activists highlight grievances like identity-based discrimination and political marginalization through protests and strikes, pushing for reforms but sometimes triggering government crackdowns. The central government's response, whether through dialogue, repression, or military action, further shapes the crisis. These movements play pivotal roles in either escalating tensions or paving the way for potential solutions, with their actions and the government's reactions crucially determining the path forward. Ethiopia's future hinges on leadership choices regarding peaceful separation or violent disintegration. 1. Peaceful separation and reconciliation. If leaders opt for a negotiated separation, inclusive dialogue and international support can facilitate a smooth transition. This scenario leads to stable new states with cooperative relationships, promoting regional peace and economic growth. 2. Renewed conflict and fragmentation. If leadership resorts to military solutions, the country could face renewed conflict. Armed groups may intensify resistance, leading to widespread violence and humanitarian crises. Limited international intervention could result in prolonged instability and fragmentation similar to Yugoslavia's disintegration in the 1990s. 3. Stalled reforms and authoritarianism. Leadership might attempt to maintain the status quo through authoritarian measures, stalling political reforms and increasing repression of opposition movements. This path results in a fragile state with ongoing internal conflicts and economic challenges. 4. Successful federalism and unity. Pursuing genuine federalism with equitable power sharing and regional autonomy could reduce identity-based tensions. Inclusive governance and economic integration would attract investment and foster growth, leading to a stable and prosperous future. 5. International mediation and hybrid solutions. International mediation could lead to a hybrid solution. combining federalism and autonomy with international guarantees for minority rights and resource distribution. This balanced approach requires strong international commitment and cooperation, promoting long-term stability, averting chaos, or fueling the fire. The future of Ethiopia hinges not only on the actions of the international community, but also, and perhaps more importantly, on the choices made by its own leaders. Will they prioritize the well-being of their people over the pursuit of power and narrow interests, or will they continue to fuel the flames of division, leading Ethiopia down a path of further destruction? Abiy Ahmed, once hailed as a beacon of hope, now faces mounting criticism for his handling of crises in Oromia, Tigray, and Amhara, and for his increasingly authoritarian tendencies. His government's actions, marked by allegations of human rights abuses and a crackdown on dissent, have exacerbated tensions and fueled the cycle of violence. The international community must leverage all available tools to persuade Ethiopian leaders to choose dialogue and compromise over violence and repression. This includes imposing targeted sanctions on individuals and entities responsible for human rights abuses and obstructing peace efforts. Ultimately, the fate of Ethiopia rests in the hands of its own people. They must demand accountability from their leaders, reject the politics of division and hatred, and embrace a vision of a shared future based on peace, justice, and inclusivity. The road ahead will be challenging, but the alternative, a descent into chaos and bloodshed, is unthinkable. The leaders of Ethiopia at this critical juncture have a moral obligation to steer the region away from the abyss and towards a brighter future. Chapter 10. Reimagining Ethiopia's Future. Ethiopia stands at a pivotal moment, grappling with historical grievances while striving for an inclusive and prosperous future. This vision can be realized through decentralization, truth and reconciliation, and inclusive governance. Despite the abolition of the imperial system in 1974 and the establishment of a federal structure in the 1990s, Ethiopia still operates with centralized control. Decentralizing power within Ethiopia's federal system can grant regions more autonomy while preserving national unity. Ethiopia's federal system, established in the mid-1990s, aimed to manage diversity and promote development by dividing the country into regional states along ethno-linguistic lines. Strengthening this system can address regional grievances and foster inclusive governance. Decentralization empowers regional and local governments, enhancing public service delivery and increasing citizen participation. It reduces tensions along ethno-linguistic lines by giving regions greater control over their affairs, fostering a sense of ownership and inclusion. Additionally, decentralized governance stimulates local economies by enabling regions to develop tailored economic policies and attract investment, leading to balanced and sustainable growth. Effective decentralization requires building the capacity of regional and local governments, ensuring coordination and oversight to prevent fragmentation, and strengthening the legal and institutional framework. This involves training officials, improving infrastructure, and revising laws to support greater regional autonomy. Ethiopia's leadership must commit to genuine political reforms and inclusive dialogue, engaging all stakeholders to address historical grievances and promote equitable power sharing. Establishing a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, in Ethiopia is crucial for addressing historical grievances and promoting healing. The TRC should include representatives from all nations, nationalities, and peoples, political factions, and civil society organizations to ensure diverse perspectives and legitimacy. Public hearings would allow victims and perpetrators to share their experiences, fostering acknowledgement of past wrongs and validating victims' suffering. Comprehensive reports documenting human rights abuses and historical injustices should be made publicly accessible to educate society. Restorative justice measures such as reparations, community service, and public apologies can promote healing and reconciliation. Education campaigns would raise awareness about the TRC's findings and promote a culture of peace and inclusivity. The TRC can help heal past wounds, hold perpetrators accountable, and create an official historical record to prevent future injustices. By promoting understanding and empathy, the TRC can strengthen social cohesion, and build a more inclusive society. Successful implementation requires government commitment, international support, and a strong legal framework. Engaging international organizations for technical and financial assistance and training TRC members in conflict resolution and human rights documentation are essential steps. Overall, a TRC can play a pivotal role in Ethiopia's journey towards peace and stability. Inclusive governance that reflects Ethiopia's diverse population is crucial for stability and development. It ensures representation for all national groups and regions, reducing feelings of marginalization and fostering a sense of belonging. Inclusive governance promotes equitable development by addressing the specific needs of different regions, reducing disparities. A reformed political system can enhance inclusive governance through further decentralization, empowering regional and local governments to address specific needs more effectively. Electoral reforms, such as adopting proportional representation, can ensure fair representation of all groups. Strengthening institutions, including the judiciary and civil service, is essential for supporting inclusive governance. Establishing platforms for dialogue and reconciliation can address historical grievances and promote healing. Ethiopia's leadership must commit to genuine political reforms and inclusive dialogue. By embracing inclusive governance, Ethiopia can create a more stable and prosperous future that reflects the diversity of its population. The road ahead will be long and arduous, but the rewards of success are immeasurable. By embracing its diversity, healing past wounds, and fostering a more just and equitable society, Ethiopia can rise from this crisis stronger, as a nation of nations that celebrates diversity and strengthens unity. Chapter 10. Decentralization and Inclusive Governance. Ethiopia stands at a critical juncture, facing the challenge of addressing deep-seated historical grievances and promoting a prosperous future. The path forward requires a multifaceted approach that includes decentralization, truth and reconciliation, and inclusive governance. By empowering regional and local governments, Ethiopia can ensure that decisions are made closer to the people they affect, fostering a sense of ownership and accountability. This decentralization can help mitigate the concentration of power that has historically fueled tensions and conflicts. Establishing a Truth and Reconciliation Commission is another crucial step. Such a body can provide a platform for victims and perpetrators to share their stories, acknowledge past wrongs, and begin the healing process. This process is essential for addressing the root causes of division and building a foundation for lasting peace. Promoting inclusive governance means ensuring that all voices are heard and that no group is marginalized. This involves creating political structures that represent the diverse makeup of the Ethiopian society and fostering a culture of dialogue and compromise. The international community has a crucial role to play in supporting Ethiopia through this transition. This includes providing financial and technical assistance, facilitating dialogue and reconciliation, and holding all parties accountable for their actions. The success of this endeavor ultimately rests on the shoulders of Ethiopia's peoples, who must embrace diversity, heal past wounds, and build a more just and equitable political future, however that turns out to be. The road ahead will be long and arduous, but the rewards of success are immeasurable. By embracing a new vision for Ethiopia that celebrates and prioritizes the well-being of its diverse nations, nationalities, and peoples, Ethiopia can emerge from the ashes of this crisis as a stronger nation of nations. Alternatively, by allowing the emergence of free and democratic nations, the region can play a positive role in celebrating good neighborliness, cementing stability, and ensuring prosperity. The time for action is now. The international community must stand with the nations, nationalities, and peoples of Ethiopia in their journey towards freedom, equality, justice, democracy, lasting peace, and prosperity for all their citizens. Chapter 11, A Call to Action. The crisis in Ethiopia is a stark reminder that the international community cannot afford to be bystanders to conflict and injustice. The world has a moral obligation to act decisively, to alleviate the suffering of the Ethiopian people, and to prevent this crisis from spiraling into a regional catastrophe. The time for platitudes and half measures is over. The international community must move beyond its traditional toolkit of sanctions and ceasefires and embrace a more proactive and comprehensive approach. Millions of Ethiopians are facing starvation and displacement. The international community must scale up its humanitarian response, ensuring that aid reaches those most in need, regardless of their ethnicity or political affiliation. All parties to the conflict must be brought to the negotiating table with the aim of achieving a lasting political solution. This will require addressing the root causes of the conflict, including historical injustices, political marginalization, and competition over resources. The atrocities committed by all sides of the conflict must be investigated, and those responsible must be held accountable. This includes imposing targeted sanctions, supporting international justice mechanisms, and ending impunity for human rights violations. Addressing the root causes of the conflict is essential to prevent future violence. This includes promoting inter-nation dialogue, fostering reconciliation, and supporting initiatives that address historical grievances and promote social cohesion. The crisis in Ethiopia is a test of the international community's resolve and commitment to its values. Failure to act decisively and effectively will not only have devastating consequences for Ethiopia, but will also undermine global peace and security. The world must not fail the nations, nationalities, and peoples of Ethiopia. The time for action is now. Thank you for watching Ethiopia's Disintegration, Inevitable or Avoidable. Please subscribe, follow, join, and like us on our various social media outlets.